Back now to our special focus this evening. 13 years after a 35-year-old Kapali Patne and her unborn child died during a cesarean delivery at a Bengaluru hospital, allegedly because of medical negligence, the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission has ordered a compensation of 1.6 crore to the victim's family.
That's right, and the Commission, holding that it was a case of medical negligence, the NCDRC stated that in its order, it stated that it was not convinced by some of the submissions by the hospital. While the victim's family alleged that Kapali died after a fall from the operation table, the hospital contended that she died due to a severe reaction to an anaesthetic drug. Take a look at our report.
Kapali Patne was a nutritionist who hated hospitals. Her husband Parikshit Dalal hates them even more. He lost his wife and unborn child 13 years ago at the very hospital where Kapali was admitted for a cesarean delivery. Last he saw her was when she was wheeled in for the delivery on April 16, 2010.
She went in absolutely fine, and within 2 hours of the operation she was declared dead, and they said they could not even rescue the baby, which came as a huge shock and surprise to us. The entire left hand side had injuries which were found inside the body. Obviously, when an absolutely fine patient goes in and comes out dead, a lot of questions need to be asked.
Parikshit decided to knock on the doors of the Consumer Court, initiated criminal proceedings, and even sought the help of Karnataka Medical Council, which exonerated the doctors. Finally, 13 years later, the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission has asked Santosh Hospital in Bengaluru to pay 1.5 crore rupees as compensation and the anesthetist to pay 10 lakh rupees. The obstetrician has been exonerated.
It is not about the money. We are not fighting for the money. The fight is to act as a deterrent for other hospitals and doctors who today are put on a very, very high pedestal.
Santosh Hospital has consistently denied allegations of medical negligence and had argued that the death was a result of an adverse reaction to anesthetics.
In the year 2018, the Honorable High Court of Karnataka had passed a judgment where the KMC was asked to constitute a special committee, and following which they were supposed to examine the whole thing. So Karnataka Medical Council constituted a committee of 3 members, and they conducted an elaborate session and examined both the sides of the parties. Following which they found out that there was no negligence from the hospital or the doctors.
While the hospital has denied allegations and aims to fight this further, there are many questions that remain unanswered. Number 1, if there was an accidental mishap inside the operation theatre, why would the doctors keep it under wraps before declaring the patient dead? Number 2, why would the hospital records show overwritings, and why would the ultrasound be recorded post the time of death of the patient? Number 3, if the compensation stands at 1.5 crore rupees and the doctors remain exonerated, what is the value of life? With camera person Kumar, Pratibha Raman in Bengaluru for NDTV.
Well, we'll discuss that last question that Pratibha raised in that report. What's really the yardstick for determining compensation in a medical negligence case? Is it just arbitrary? It's sad enough that the process can be long and arduous. We're joined by Parikshit Dalal, who's fought that case for the last 13 years. And also to get an alternate perspective, we have Dr. Rajiv Jayadevan as well, Vice Chairman of the Research Cell, IMA, from Kerala State. But first to you, Parikshit. It's been a long battle on this. Is there a sense of closure when you see that verdict, or is this campaign for justice going to continue till you get a verdict from a higher court?
I mean, the campaign will continue. Closure is yet to come. I think this is one of the steps for us to get closure. It has taken us 13 years to prove that the entire story which they concocted of anaphylaxis was absolutely debunked by the NCDRC yesterday. They have said that death is absolutely due to injury which she sustained inside the operation theatre, and no attempt was made to rescue the baby or the correct treatment which should have been given, even though an accident like that has happened, what they should have done is done a laparotomy, unburdened the mother of the child and found the internal bleeding and stopped that. Both mother and child would be alive today if they had taken the correct procedure to save the patient even after an injury has taken place. Their whole defense has been to cook up a story of anesthesia, hoping that we would not go for a post-mortem and the truth would be buried with Kapali and the unborn child. Today, NCDRC vehemently has said that they do not buy the story of anesthesia. Kapali has died due to injuries which she has sustained inside the operation theatre, and no medical treatment which was supposed to have been given was given to her. Our fight will continue. I don't think this is the end of our quest for justice. We are still fighting the criminal court case. We will also appeal to the MCI now that this judgment has come. Why should the MCI not take up this matter and restrict the licenses of these doctors who have been convicted by the highest civil court in this country, which is headed by a retired Supreme Court judge and a very, very eminent senior doctor? There is no reason for MCI not to take suo motu action. If required, we will also approach them. But I think we are far from getting closure. Our quest for justice is going to continue. And today, I mean, look at how brazen the system has become, that even after getting a judgment, we have no closure. And the kind of compensation they're talking about, the NCDRC order very clearly says there is no basis for computing compensation in a case. They are unable to find a way to justify the lives of two people. Two people have died, and there is no way to compute the value of death in this country. It's amazing to me.
Right, and in fact, it's extremely unfortunate that first such cases happen and then the quest for justice is so long. And Dr. Jayadevan, if I can come to you on this, the last point that Parikshit made, that how do you really compute the value of a life, and that too one that's lost due to medical negligence, due to the negligence of some hospital staff. So according to a doctor's point of view, there are several cases of medical negligence. Do you think there should be a standardized way to categorize which death is due to negligence to make sure that the impacted families don't have to go through such a hard time, such a long journey to get justice?
My condolences to Parikshit. It's such a tragic loss in his life and for the whole family. The question about medical negligence is it's basically defined as many people confuse medical negligence as a medical error. Now, I'm no legal professional, but my training as a physician lets me know that medical negligence basically is the failure to administer.
Dr. Rajiv, I'm really sorry, Dr. Rajiv. I think there's some problem with the audio. We're not able to hear you clearly. We're just trying to get that fixed. But as we do that, Parikshit, very briefly, what is the most difficult part of this for a victim or a family when you're trying to fight? Is it the long delays? Is it the personal trauma that you go through emotionally? Yes, that's a very difficult part. But in terms of systems and process, what's possibly the most challenging aspect of fighting a medical negligence case?
No, the way it has been structured is the onus of proving negligence is on me. A patient walks into the hospital and comes out dead. Why should I be responsible to prove why the death has happened? The records are there. Right. I was not an eyewitness. We were not allowed to go inside. Fighting the system, long hours of deliberation with the lawyers, running around courts, trying to seek justice.
Parikshit,
that's an administrative issue. But today, look at this. Today, it has been upheld that the postmortem is right. There has been death due to injury.
Parikshit,
and the doctors are held accountable. And yet, I don't have a sense of closure in this case.
Really sad, Parikshit, but taking that main point that you made in terms of onus of proof, the burden of proof lies on the one who's making the allegation, which is possibly how the system works. Doctor, how do you see it now that we can hear you clearly? How do you see it from a doctor's point of view? How do we go about this process in such a way the victims get the justice as well as doctors get justice in case of false cases that are put to them? In the genuine cases, how do we make sure that the victims have an easier process at claiming justice or compensation?
First, my condolences to Mr. Parikshit for this extreme tragedy that occurred in his life and that of the family. The question is about medical negligence. Briefly for our viewers, medical negligence is defined as the failure to administer what is considered standard of care in whatever field it's being given in, and this failure leading to serious harm or injury to the patient. So that is the definition of medical negligence. Many people confuse medical negligence for an error. Errors are common in all fields, and not all errors result in harm. In this case, we are aware from the media reports and from Mr. Parikshit himself that the patient actually lost her life, and the unborn child also lost the life in the incident. I do not have the specifics of the medical case here, but I can say, as with my knowledge and training as a physician, that the loss of a life can never be compensated with any amount of money. That is the absolute truth. You cannot compensate for a loss of life, or in this case, loss of 2 lives. The question about whether compensation is arbitrary, compensation is not by definition arbitrary. It is true that there is an element of subjectivity, but it is defined on the basis of the principles of law, the extent of damage, the financial hardship suffered by the family, the specifics of the case. And so multiple factors go into determining the amount of the compensation.
Perhaps we need more clarity on that process, but of course, this conversation just perhaps the start of launching that kind of a process. Thank you so much, Parikshit, as well as Dr. Rajiv Jayadevan, and all the best, Parikshit, in your future efforts at keeping that process alive.